All right, hey everyone. Excited today because I got Brian York here, who I think a lot of you know. Brian is the CMO of the Agora companies. Brian, thanks for being here.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really glad to have you on here. And this kind of started this last conversation. We kind of started because you left a comment on that video, the state of FinPub, and I
Yeah.
thought it was a really important point that you made. And basically, just to read it to everybody, you basically said that the bull market, and I'm quoting here, and COVID forced FinPub into the mainstream. Most businesses chased the volume with mainstream ideas. That was a mistake. We need to refocus on big fringe ideas and go deeply into those ideas.
Hmm.
Customers pay us to be trusted advisors with ideas they won't get from their brokers.
Yeah.
And I love that because to me, that is kind of the essence of what FinPub has been forever. Would you elaborate on that a little bit, though? When you say like people were chasing volume and we were forced into the mainstream.
Yeah, it's a big, I know, and thank you I think this is a hugely important point. So thank you for having me on to talk about it. But I think if we look at the bull market, it hurt a lot of things in our business. And I know that in previous episodes, you've had people mention this. It became too easy. It became too easy to chase ideas. We forgot all of the ways that we serve a customer best throughout any market. So I think what it did was force us to go really into honestly pot stocks and crypto. What's the easiest way to make money at the time? Pot stocks and crypto. Unfortunately, right now with crypto, it seems like there's another upswing in easy money in making in crypto promos, but that's another subject for another day. Um, but our customers don't always pay us to be right. They pay us for well-researched ideas. And when we're simply chasing the bull market, we're competing with the mainstream. And I think that's something that we need to remember is we are never mainstream. We are in the fringe. We are chasing ideas that seem, quite honestly, unbelievable. But they happen. They happen a lot. And that's what our customers are looking for. If they just wanted those mainstream ideas that came out of chasing the bull market, they would pick up anything off the newsstand they wanted to or anything online, but
Right.
not us.
Yeah, I think it's such an interesting set of distinctions I feel like we need to make around that too, right? Because
Yeah.
like I've been talking quite a bit about the mainstream of financial information
Hmm.
because everybody is everyone is consuming information around investing online. It's becoming a much more common thing.
Yeah.
But that is very distinctly different. That has to do with kind of an increase in demand,
Yeah.
right? But what you're talking about is very specifically about what they will pay for,
About the ideas.
right? The ideas themselves,
Yeah.
right? Because they can, like you said, there's a lot of free information, and the free information is exploding. That's been a continued trend for I think since the internet started. Is that the
Yeah.
amount of free
Sure.
information, the quality of it has continued to improve over time. And so what people are willing to pay for is very different than just investing information. And so that
Correct.
idea of fringe ideas and niche ideas is where
Yeah.
all of our acquisition is going to come from.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And interesting ideas. And, really everything in this business comes back to the idea. It drives the offer. It drives, how we deliver things. It drives what we deliver. So it all comes back to the idea in the end or in the beginning, however you want to look at that. But in terms of like, I forgot where I was going. Oh, no, the cocktail party conversation. Like people want to go, if you think of it that way, people want to go into parties and talk to their friends about really interesting, sometimes kooky ideas. And quite honestly, that's what we're publishing. That's what we have to publish because that's what people are demanding.
Right. And I think that's a really good point too, because there are people who have some publishers who found that a huge segment of their audience don't actually invest, which is fascinating
Yeah.
in and of itself in terms of
Yeah.
human
Yeah.
behavior. That they're paying for investment research, but it's primarily because they're interested and they want to be interesting about these
It's
things.
actually a scary statistic. I've been looking at that a lot recently. It's very
Yeah.
scary. Yeah.
Yeah. So why do you think it's scary?
Um, it's scary to me to think that 75% of your audience that paid for something isn't using it.
You think it's
Uh,
that high?
I think it can be in some cases. Yeah. Yeah, I think it can be. And I think the usage of the product ties into a lot of different things. Part of it is certainly going to be the track record. Part of it's customer service. Part of it is just usability. Um, But in the end, if our customers are not using our product, then we're failing them.
Right.
Yeah.
Because then they're not, I mean, the lifetime value on that too isn't going to be great. And then
Yeah.
why are they there?
Yeah.
And that's one of the probably some of the more aggressive front end products that have been out there, is that they were really successful in bringing new people in, but they weren't really good back end buyers because they weren't actually consuming the information or the product in order to do something. Isn't that?
Yeah, and all of our efforts should really be on that middle of funnel stuff. The top of funnel stuff is shrinking. And I think honestly, it's going to shrink some more. It's not going away by any means, but it is shrinking. And to a certain extent, we should make it shrink to those people who were able to monetize to an extreme in the middle of funnel. But again, all that ties back to using our products and hitting the right audience, to my point that I made in that comment, hitting the right audience with the right ideas that they're willing to pay for.
Right. I'm gonna dig into that a little bit more in a second. But first, I want to kind of make sure that I'm complete in kind of drawing out some of these things that you brought out up here. Part of chasing volume during that time when it was boom, I mean, like I've heard some people say that, well, that's kind of what we had to do in this period of time was, you kind of let your winners run. But then like the fallout is when it hurts, but it wasn't necessarily wrong to go after those ideas like Bitcoin and things like that when they were such a big boom, because that's where people's interest was, attention was.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. It's hard to say even in hindsight whether it was wrong. I think where it becomes wrong is when you're chasing an idea that perhaps resonates with your audience at the time, but doesn't lead into further monetization. Then I think it's the wrong idea. And we're our business. We can't make snap decisions. We have to look at very long-term tests that could take 1, 2, 3 years. I mean, we look at 3 years as a fully baked lifetime value. Could be more than that, but that's our measure of 3 years. In some cases, we need to look at that, and in some cases, it might take 1.5 to 2 years to realize, shit, we might have gotten the wrong idea here. You can't go backwards though.
Right.
And you also can't wait 2 years to make decisions about the business when it comes to acquisition.
Right. And it's there's some very unique things about FinnPub. And one of them is this idea that we go after niche ideas.
Yeah.
And other marketing kind of cultures at this point, other info marketing cultures and stuff like that, are actually focusing more on niche audience first. So they might say like, an example, I'm not saying that this is something that you should do or not do, but like, okay, we're going to go after the female investor, or we're going to go after a specific subset of investor that is only interested in this thing, or but niche audience has never really been a FinPub focus. It's always been on niche ideas, right? And do you think that is going to continue? Do you think that there's opportunity to explore niche audience as well? Do you think that really, because investing is, the idea is what it is, regardless of who you happen to be, that it's just going to stick with niche idea entirely? Or have you thought about that, or had any discussions around those kind of things around niche audiences versus?
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. I mean, we're always thinking of audience. We're always thinking of our avatar when it comes to those ideas, particularly how we market those ideas. To the extent of, idea pops up as we flesh it out. What would John think? What would, so and so think? Our fictional avatar there. But are we looking at the audience to develop the ideas? Yeah, I guess we are, because we always want to think about what keeps them up at night. What are their fears? What are their dreams? What are their goals? What are their desires? That's part of that thought process of, what are they thinking about that we're not talking about?
Yeah. I think it was Richard Stanton Jones who had the great avatar in mind of the perfect FinPub customer is the millionaire pig farmer. It's like
right,
blue collar entrepreneurial folks who
well, it's funny, but I'm sure you talked to some of the folks back in the day that were with Palm Beach Letter, and they were running Bill Bonner's letter at the time, and their winning ad, the image for it was just him as a farmer in front of a bunch of cattle, And that was basically the headline, was something like millionaire farmer, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it works.
It does. And you know, it's interesting to me because I thought about this when I came across this video of Mark Andreessen talking about their when they started A16 and how even as a VC fund, what they did in the beginning was they targeted a niche audience. They targeted
Yeah,
other founders. They didn't raise from other funds. They specifically went to founders and said, "Hey, um, here's why we think you're a better investor than
yeah,
other people." And by doing that, they established like a bunch of things that were very specific to their business. But um, it was such an interesting, I think, idea to me because here we have the largest VC fund in the world by far, the
hmm
800-pound gorilla, and he started with a very niche audience.
hmm
And that same marketing concept seemed to work.
yeah,
But then what makes it even more interesting to me is that the growth of that company comes because they invested so much in niche ideas.
yeah,
And so there's this tension between these two things that I think is important
yeah,
um, to explore to a certain degree.
yeah. I agree completely.
And when you think about like kind of the state of FinPub, then like how do you see things right now? You know, we've had what was this massive pullback.
Yeah,
There was industry headwind and company headwinds for the last 5 years, basically since I'd say the right after the crypto boom, we had the crypto parabolic move. The first one got pretty much all you guys off of Google and Facebook for a couple of years. We've had
yeah.
FTC cases throughout the industry. We've had
You know what
user
day it was,
ransomware.
John? It was April 1st, 2018.
Yeah.
Google kicked us off April Fool's Day. What a day. I'll never forget that day. So,
Yeah. And so like we've had like all these industry headwinds and individual companies have had bigger ones and less than others. But
yeah,
we've had the softest sales market in late 22, early 23 in
sure.
a decade. How are you guys seeing, the industry at this point? How are you seeing the kind of the market and the state of things?
Yeah. I don't think it's going to go back to what it was, nor should it. And again, that kind of ties into what I said before, where if we look at that bull run of 10, 11, 12 years where anything we put out there sold, I'm not sure we brought in the right customer, to your earlier question. Um, and I think we should shrink that a little bit. I think everyone should intentionally shrink that a little bit just for long-term sustainability,
Mhm.
is bringing in the right customer, serving that customer well. And I think there are two big points here. Bringing in the right customer, I think, involves something that we did not have to face in that bull run. And that is, kind of the four-letter, actually five-letter word of direct response, which is brand. I don't think we're never going to sell by brand. And I'm going to say that again, just so everyone's very clear. We are not set brand marketers. We are not selling via brand, but the brand supports what we are selling. It supports the long sales letter. And what do I mean by that? It's really, do we know who we are? Do we know what we're selling? And from the outside looking in, does the customer see that same exact thing that we are? Because if there's a difference there, if there's a conflict there, then it makes it very, very hard to sell in today's environment. Because what's the first thing someone does when they see a sales letter? They go off and search for more information about you. They've got to find things that are aligned and cohesive with the message that was in that sales letter. Um, and then the other side of it, in terms of, I forgot the other side of it now. What was I talking about there, John? Bringing in the right and scaling it. So again, just making sure that customer comes in on an idea, on an offer, on a product where we are giving them 100% of what we promised, 125% of what we promised, and just customer service out the wazoo.
Mhm.
It's maintaining those relationships, keeping those customers becomes ever more important. And again, I think that's a mistake that was made in FinPub during that bull run, was it was just so damn easy to get customers. We didn't think enough about retention. We didn't think enough about renewals. We didn't think about that long-term relationship. We just kept churning, going after. And when I say we, I mean the global we, not just
Yeah,
Agora. We just kept
absolutely.
going after people, hand over fist. But I think now it's ever more important to give them 125% to make sure that they stick around and that you create a lifelong customer with as many people as you possibly can.
Yeah, and I always think of like, especially when I think of like the kind of the classic kind of Agora letters. And for me, some of the classics, of course, were, I mean, the Daily Reckoning with Bill Bonner and everything
Yeah.
that he put out and some of that. Like there is absolutely like a relationship that's built
Yeah.
with the person, right? So you have like the fact that they had an ad for him that's the Millionaire Farmer, um, both connects to the customer and talks a lot about who he is, and his ideas, and kind of he's great because he has such an amazing voice,
Hmm.
and his ideas are
Hmm.
very distinct, I think, in pretty much financial media. Um, but that issue of like uniqueness comes down to like in having great ideas. I mean, it comes down to like having really great editorial and editors who are thinking. And so like finding those people seems to be like a harder thing.
It
There's a lot of
is.
people with
Yeah.
mainstream ideas. There's a lot of people who
Yeah.
have good ideas, but they're just not that interesting. People,
Yeah.
hard to make them interesting, or they resist being made interesting. Um, so how do you think about that piece of like the editor and the relationship that the editor has to build with the customer through the copy and through the editorial and through the whole
Hmm.
kind of business?
I mean, that's the business we're in is relationship. Revenue is a byproduct of that. We've got to build and maintain that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
We always talk about it like in the dating analogy, like, you're basically asking somebody out on a date and what are the steps you're going to go through. So that's really it. I mean, I would think the only flaw to that dating analogy is uh, that you can and should sell somewhat aggressively up front, but you should sell them on the thing that they came in on, the idea that they came in on. And if
Yeah.
they don't buy right away, that's fine. That's fine. Let's build that relationship. Let's talk to them. Let's think about them. If we look at lifetime value, so if we look at any given business and we look at someone that's acquired as a lead versus someone that's acquired as a direct to paid acquisition over a span of a year, the lead acquired acquisition, we call it a two-step acquisition, is always going to be worth more. The lifetime value of those people built on the relationship is always worth more than the direct to paid acquisition.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Yes.
That's amazing. So,
It costs more.
right,
Investing in those good people and those good editors, that costs more. Sending
right.
out those emails, that costs more. So,
But that also kind of, brings up in my head when I think about the big bull market and a lot of the promos that were going out. The guru and a lot of those was basically like an afterthought. Um,
mhm.
he was maybe there was a little section about them, but he had very little to do with the promo, even in terms
Yeah.
of how it was presented on some of those. Maybe it was, and then the consequence then of that is that you haven't really built it up front. You haven't built that relationship up front. You haven't
Yeah.
really like sold them on this person and how he sees the world. And
Yeah. They got far too sold on the greed than the
yeah,
person behind the ideas. Yeah.
yeah. And so I always thought that like, and you can't make every package a guru package,
Yeah.
but the guru package to me was always like, if a customer buys on that guy, I mean, he's in because he's in for this person.
Exactly.
And so almost all front end should have like, I don't know, a guru package element.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, the Oxford Club, and I don't know if they still run this, I need to check, but they used to have something called the club package or the tour
Mm,
package. And it was literally, if you can imagine, because they're in this old brownstone mansion down the street that way.
right.
And if you can imagine just being taken on a tour through there, and these are the people that you're going to meet. This is the investment director. This is the chairman. This is the lovely club room that you can sit down in and have a cocktail with your other members. And it was all about the belief system of the Oxford Club. And that the scale wasn't high, but man, those people that bought on that, they stuck. They stuck around and they spent a lot of money. So I think you go from that like a belief system package, and then maybe next step up is that guru package,
Mm,
and then you get into like that system or just that pure greed package is the
right.
one that people don't really care who is telling me this. They're just sold on that idea.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know if you guys have found this. I've seen it, but I'm not. It's been a while since I've been hiring copywriters or writing directly. So I thought that a lot of what I saw when I would talk to writers or see the promos going out was there's a younger generation that just they kind of didn't know how to write those packages anymore
Yeah.
because they just it was like, oh well, I just put 10,000% behind everything,
Yeah.
and that's kind of the promo that I'm going to write.
Yeah.
Uh, and so it was hard to find people who could then make that transition now to like, hey, you can't quite do that anymore. The FTC says don't do that.
Yeah.
Um, which, by the way, do you think that how much do you, I mean, back up, because it's hard to, no one wants to talk about this stuff too publicly, but I was going to say, like, how much do you think that the FTC kind of coming in and saying, hey, like we're changing kind of the rules that where the line is, and we're going to get really aggressive about this, and so you have to be much more conservative with your copy. How much do you feel like that impacted kind of this last period where sales were down? Do you think that was a large consequence of that? Do you think that was do you think that just fueled something else, that the market kind of shifting? Do you think like how do you
Yeah,
think about
that's an interesting question. I think it added to it, but I don't think it was the primary reason, and mainly on the back end. Um, I think it's a good thing. I think what the FTC did, and I think that's been said here in this space, is that these were rules that needed to be set down to clean up the space a little bit, clean up the space a lot, frankly. We as a company, the stakeholders in the company sat down and they said, we're even going to go above and beyond what the FTC asks. They set in place their own series of rules that look for honesty, authenticity, and transparency in everything we do. Google has a similar belief system when it comes to evaluating their own page. So I think it's important. And if a fraction of sales was lost because of that, then it probably should have been lost. I'm sure everyone's going to call me after this or email me and say, what the hell are you talking about, Brian? But again, I think it gets back to these were probably not the right people. And if we were able to segment those people off that came in only because we were super aggressive and super hyperbolic, we'll probably find that there's not a lot of lifetime value. But on the flip side, the refund rate is probably enormous on those type of people. Yeah.
Yeah. Not every front end dollar is equal.
Yeah.
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 And, with that kind of idea of shrinking a little bit, I had a good conversation with Mike Pizzo the other day.
Okay. Yeah.
But, and he was saying that him and Joe had, Joe Schriefer had many times had this conversation that maybe the right size of a publishing brand is maybe 40, 50 million, rather than like pushing them to 1 to 300 in their case at one point. Do you think that sounds about right? Like there's kind of a natural size to a brand, especially since it's fringe ideas, or?
Yeah. I think a brand with fringe, well, maybe not even use the word brand. I think a business with fringe ideas needs to stay small and nimble. And I think it gets very difficult when you're over that 50 million size. So I definitely agree with Joe and Mike when it comes to that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that seems to be, I haven't found a lot of people who've pushed up towards 100 million.
Yeah.
Who were happy with the business they had at that point.
Yeah.
It seems like most people were like, yeah, I wish I'd known.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I completely agree.
Well, and then, with that, when I look back on Agora's history, because I mean, Agora, you guys basically have been, you've defined the industry in so many ways, right? Over the last 20, 25, 30 years. And one of the things that I always admired about the way that the Agora grew is it had kind of an ecosystem approach to businesses where you had talented people. Someone had a really good idea. They wanted to try and launch a pub. They'd get the chance to. And if it worked, it worked. And if it didn't, the guy got his chance, and maybe there's some money was recouped, maybe some money was lost. You don't lose the talent. They go back into another group.
Yeah.
But because of that, you were able to grow like this ecosystem of, it's dozens of companies.
Yeah.
And so if it's a smaller overall publishing or business unit, it would seem that like the plan going forward might be to kind of grow out new small pubs again or franchises. Is that part of the plan? Because I know there's a lot of conversation just as in the industry about Agora's plans to like maybe not be as big as they were as you guys were before and in general. And so what does that look like for you guys? Are you thinking about like?
Yeah, I mean, I can't comment on specific plans going forward, but I would say everybody always wants to grow. We just want to grow the right way. And I think to your point, if we look back decades ago, gosh, I started with Oxford in 2000, so it's 24 years now. And Oxford was a place where Money Map Press came out of Oxford. Stansberry Research came out of Oxford. Stansberry's now MarketWise, of course.
Mhm.
Um, Wall Street Daily, which ended up becoming part of Agora Financial. I'm sure I'm missing a few. Sovereign Society, which ultimately became Banyan.
Banyan, yeah.
So it was a breeding ground. It was an incubator for so many different new ideas. And if you look at them now, the Oxford Group has the core Oxford, and then they've got Manward Press, and they've got Monument Traders Alliance. And Monument Traders Alliance is I'd say a very different idea and execution of the idea. It's that live trading room. It's not your traditional Oxford concept of
Mhm.
investing, but it still works. There's a lot of crossover in between the files.
It's so interesting to think that all of that came out of Oxford, because Oxford,
Yeah.
um, I remember, I don't know, maybe it was the 2005, the Agora marketing conference that um, put out some CDs. I remember the conference was like a $25,000 conference way back. I think it was '05, somewhere in that period of time.
Hmm.
And I remember there was like Porter was there, and he was like, there is no marketing model. We're all doing different things. Um, the Oxford group was a small group of, I think there was maybe 4 or 5 marketers total, but
Hmm.
they were crushing it in pay per click.
Hmm.
But like to see all those different groups coming out of that group, and then in the real boom here, you can say that a lot of the groups that came out of them for at least a period of time were larger than them.
Yeah.
What do you think is so unique about like Oxford, that like it's the one that's stable? It seemed like the
Yeah.
most stable of the businesses, right?
Yeah.
What do you think is unique about? Is there a specific culture? Is it something about that belief system? Like, what do you think that is?
Yeah, I think part of it was culture. I think part of it was the stability for sure. I think part of it is that they're typically the most valuable customers. That might vary now, but historically it was the highest LTV of any of our customers. You had a fairly wide range. You had people as young as 50 something upwards from there. So you had varying investment styles too.
Hmm.
But I think also you had information junkies there. You had people that were really sold on reading and understanding the ideas. And that's where in the early days when you had Porter, who's just a master of ideas, coming up with ideas and conveying those ideas to people. I think that was one thing for sure that would made him successful from the start. Money Map Press, again, a global investing idea. So there we go again. We're going back to the idea. It's the big idea,
Hmm.
whatever big idea there was at that time. That's
Yeah.
what grabbed people. That's why they were successful. And really, it was a style, a management style back then, which very much welcomed that. To your point.
Nice, nice. And then when we talk about the ideas, then like there's also like there's a difference in a franchise idea, like a business unit idea,
Yeah.
and like a promo idea. What do you think is like when it comes to having that like kind of global idea for the business unit, like what are kind of the edges of that? Like how does that have to look to be kind of worthwhile?
Hmm.
Just,
Give me a
throwing
stumper there,
random
John.
small idea
Yeah.
questions at you.
The edges of the franchise idea. Um, I'd have to think about that, John. I'd say first and foremost, have a franchise idea. I mean, I remember one time years ago, I was asking two businesses overseas, two businesses in the same location and two different publishers. And I said, all I need really is your elevator pitch. Because we were working on their advertising at the time. And I said, all your ads are basically going to work off of the core pillars of your business. And those core pillars are built around your idea, your elevator pitch, your franchise idea. And one gave it to me within 10 minutes. That was fantastic. And
Mhm.
the other one, it took 2 months for me to coax it out of him, and it was horrible. So, that's just bad if you
Right,
don't know
right.
what you're selling. So what are the edges of that? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the
But it
answer to
should be
that. Maybe
something
it,
distinct. How about
yeah,
this? What would be some good examples of like, hey, that's a really great franchise that you understood what they were doing?
yeah. Um, Well, if we look at international living, which is pseudo financial,
Hmm.
but the first of Agoras, it's retiring overseas for less as an American.
Hmm.
which at the time was a very fringe idea. I think, one of the boundaries, I guess, based on that would be it needs to be a fringe idea.
Yeah.
Now that idea is not so fringe, and they're having to explore kind of subsets of that idea. So yeah, it's got to be something that's fringe.
Yeah, and that's a very, I mean, that's been running for since the 70s, right? I mean,
1978 or 79 was when
yeah.
that launched, I believe. Yeah.
Wow, that's an amazingly stable and long life for an info
Yeah.
marketing info publishing
Yeah.
business.
Yeah.
That's so like the fringe ideas, um, and I think that's something that like, in the trading side of the world, people sometimes lose
Hmm.
is they're so focused on I have this trading system.
Yeah.
And so there isn't really an idea other than like maybe there's momentum trading, maybe there's, but those ideas are some of them can be fringe, but a lot of times they're relatively well known, and then you don't have a lot of new things to say about it. And that makes it very
Yeah.
difficult to have to run this kind of a marketing model in particular, I think.
Well, then I think it goes back to the editor. The onus is on the editor to build a fantastic freaking relationship and maintain that relationship.
Mhm.
Because if someone can get those ideas anywhere, if someone can get that information anywhere, they want to go to the person that they like to get it and that they
Right.
trust. It's trust there is what you need to build.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where I remember I forget who it was, but might have been something Brian Hunt wrote, or I forget who, but something about like on the trust side, like you got to own your mistakes. So when you're
Yeah.
wrong,
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
when you're wrong, I
Pe-
was wrong. When you
yeah.
win, we won. Kind of thing.
Customers will absolutely forgive you for being wrong about something. What they will not forgive you for is sloppy research or poorly researched ideas. Yeah, that they will go on to someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think that's the thing is there's lots of someone else's these days.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So
exactly.
what else is on your mind these days about kind of the industry, where it's going, where it's not going that it should, or
Yeah.
seeing in your spot, you see marketing from so many different business units too.
Hmm.
Um, how do you like, okay, we're shrinking, but what's the path forward, do you think, for
Yeah.
kind of pubs at this point, or what else is on like a major thing that we should be thinking about that maybe we're not?
Yeah, I think for me it's really keeping my eyes on connecting the dots. It's the omni-channel relationship. Because our readers are to the point, it's not my parents anymore. My parents are 81. They're beyond or slightly beyond our demographic. It's someone who isn't much older than me now that I'm selling to. It's someone who's very savvy. It's someone who isn't just going to a website for information. They're going everywhere. They expect to find me everywhere. So with that comes that point that I mentioned earlier, and that's alignment. It's how do I look versus what do I perceive myself to be, but also making sure that I'm there and I'm serving my customer, serving both in acquiring and fulfilling everywhere I possibly can, where I know that they're going to be, and then connecting those dots. So connecting those dots in the data gives us such valuable information about who our customer is and what they're doing and when they're primed for another service and when they're primed to renew. So that dot connecting is something that is difficult and is something that we're working on.
Yeah. So then omni-channel kind of implies a little bit that it's, we think of it as FinPub, it's publishing, but really like you're a media company at this point.
Hmm.
And that means you have to be on whatever channels we think that the customer happens to be on.
To a certain extent.
Right. And
Yeah.
so do you think that is kind of one of the things that's going to grow then is, kind of that growing octopus of media channels that you're pushing some form of content out in some way in order to lead them back to kind of the central entity. But then that means there's a lot more production that needs to happen.
I think the first part is true. I think that's a necessity in terms of the production. That's what we can't let happen. So we need to become very intelligent with something that we've done very well, that everyone in FinPub has done very well, and that is slicing and dicing our content to repurpose and reuse it in many different ways. And that's the project. That's the exercise right now.
Yeah. So that's AI couldn't come at a better time than.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now AI is fantastic for that. But yeah, I mean, I think some of those fringe networks are a little bit underutilized right now.
Yeah.
I look at TikTok, which I was raving about 3 to 4 years ago to people to, get your ads on TikTok, get your ads on TikTok, because people my age were on TikTok
Right.
and they were there because their kids are on there. If your kids are on a network, get on there because there's value there. You know that there are other old dudes there with money that are going to invest because they're watching their kids. So how could we stand out? We stand out like a sore thumb on TikTok with an ad at the time. Now
Right.
there are financial ads all over the place, but at the time, to see a financial ad, why wouldn't a 50-year-old person click on that? Of course they would.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you see also, like, do you think, I mean, I don't know if you guys, I think you guys still do, at least on the back end, direct mail. Um, I've seen and talked to some people who are like, I mean, the biggest problem with mail these days is the listing universes aren't there,
Yeah.
but there's also no competition. And so there is, at least on the back end, pretty good opportunity just sending mail physically.
Yeah, you would think so. I honestly don't know enough about direct mail. I started right as direct mail was fading.
Yeah.
I know that we still do it. I think maybe it's reserved for our house file
Hmm.
or for ad inserts that would go with an issue.
Yeah.
But I'm not entirely certain. But I agree. There's no one else out there, so why wouldn't you do it? I
Yeah.
think market-wise still does an extensive amount.
Yeah. It seems to
Yeah.
be, it's an interesting thing because, um, that used to be the big problem is, I was raised in a household of a multi-buyer of all the bot
Yeah.
and other stuff. And so like the magalogs would come all the time. And it was just like, there was so much of it that
That's how you got into this, huh? Just
it
your
is,
child, just growing
it
up reading
is.
that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I was so proud the first time I wrote one of those types of packages because I was like, Mom, you understand this.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Um,
That's funny.
yeah. So I don't know, like um, one of the things that sparked the thought to me, besides hearing people talking about it, was I had a friend of mine works for a marketing data company that they work with, like a lot of e-com brands. In he was saying that a lot of the like the Warby Parkers of the world and other
Hmm.
things, they start on like Facebook marketing and they get up to about 50 million in sales with their digital, and then at a certain point they realize that their cost to acquire starts to be um, so high that it's cheaper to go to physical retail, and so they go
Hmm.
offline, and that's how they get the like their much more expansive growth. And it was such an interesting like dynamic for me. Like, you build your brand, or online, you reach a point where the cost to acquire gets too high, and then it becomes cheaper to go offline.
Yeah.
And then I remember in the mail, like, and this is not inflation adjusted, but it was, $130 to $150 to acquire a customer. And it's like, well, what do we pay now? $130 to $300 to acquire a customer, depending on the
Yeah.
time, and it's
Yeah.
like, it's not that different. Um, and so it just stands out to me as one of those, like, some a niche business, maybe, um, for some people,
Yeah.
but back end for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think also in the mail is new member welcome experience. I remember it was very recently I was on X and Porter had retweeted. I don't know if you say re-Xed or retweeted someone a new subscriber that got something in the mail, and it was a really well done welcome package. And talk about creating brand evangelists and raving fans. I mean, that dude just put it on Twitter, on X.
Yeah.
This is what I got, and it said Porter and Company right there. And gosh, I remember there was a group. It was Money Map when they did National Institute for Cannabis Investors, and they had a Facebook group going, and all these people were doing unboxing of their welcome package, and everyone was like, "When do I get it? I just joined. I haven't gotten mine yet." So you can't buy that sort of excitement.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
um you know when I think, like, I'm Nikki, the National Institute of Cannabis Investors, that was a very niche idea at the
hmm.
time. It was kind of mainstream storyline, but still
Yeah,
it was an investing niche. I think back to, like, what are the big front end ideas that we've had, and they have been niches. Like, there was, I mean, crypto,
hmm.
cannabis, 5G, right on the tech side. The bricks, I always go back to
Hmm.
like the early, like, 2000s. It was all variations of
Sure.
China. um so some of these stories, like, they're hitting the mainstream, but you're trying to navigate, like, here's what no one's talking about inside that
Yep.
idea,
Yep.
right? So that seems to me to be like there's this dynamic too of you have to find the fringe idea, because there are people who were talking about Bitcoin in 2012, or right, very fringe at that time, but you weren't getting the attention in sales because of it.
Mm-hmm.
But it gave you the credibility for later
Mm-hmm.
too. And so I think that there's also that tension. And I'm just curious if you think that this is accurate, that you might have to channel the attention from a mainstream idea or something that happens to be mainstreaming in terms of the media.
Yeah.
But focus it on like, well, this is the story that's not being told.
Yeah.
Everyone's missing.
Yeah. Yeah. You need that level of interest at the top, and that interest is helping you drive it into something else. So here is the hidden aspect of this that you didn't realize, and what no one is talking about in the news right now.
Yeah.
But we know.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like the prediction, it's like you're not really predicting. I mean, you are, but that's not how it feels to the customer. It's like you're illuminating hidden corners and hidden ideas and things that are not. And that, for me, that means like you're not just your editor, but your whole like copy team. Like you have to be really interested in the market, and like that I think is another thing that it was easy to get away with not being interested in the market when everything was selling so easy.
Right. Yeah, I see your point. Yeah. No, absolutely. And also the copywriters could drive the idea more than the editor, where really it should be the editor driving the idea with the copywriter latching onto that and then expanding on that idea, or at least a 50-50 relationship. But it should never be a position where the editor or the copywriter is just pushing out this idea that they know is going to sell. It's allowed to get out there in the wild, and then the editor can't necessarily support it with how they're writing and how they're talking and what they're investing in.
Oh yeah, it's so funny you say that, because I remember now in my head now I'm thinking of all these conversations I had with people who were like, this copywriter was trying to get me to do this.
Yeah.
Or I had to do this because the publisher then told me to do it anyway.
Yeah.
Because they thought it was a good sales idea, but they hated it.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me that some of those editors, that became kind of grievance that drove them to leave those publishers.
Yeah.
That like feeling that like I'm on the hook for this idiot's idea, and I'm the one that's going to be recommending.
Well, and when you don't have that communication, I mean, really the perfect triangle of communication is your editor, your copywriter, and your marketer, that they all need to be talking and know and live and breathe what each other is doing. That's what helps get good ideas out the door. That's what helps to create good customers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that seems to also be part of the reason that the freelance copywriter kind of went away. That didn't go away, but everyone favors teams. Copywriters are on teams, that you're able to keep those kind of close relationships, that close communication. Just for that reason.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, in the best case scenario, the copywriter really becomes entrenched with the editor and is talking to them nonstop during that copy creation.
Yeah. No, it's I don't know. I think that, like, to your point before, like some of the things that happened, like the pullback was good for the business in a lot of ways, just because it's made us stop and think about the business. Like, what are we doing that matters? What are we doing that maybe isn't sustainable? And now things are going, I mean,
and why are we doing this?
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing pretty much from most people that they're on the upswing pretty handily. So you're seeing that too? Like,
I think, I don't know what analogy to use. I guess we've stopped bailing out the boat, now we're making sure we don't have any more leaks in there, but it's we're getting there. Yeah. I think everyone is. I think people are seeing some lights. Internationally, I think it's the same. We had a little bit of a delayed effect in some markets internationally that might still be hanging on, but I'd say the same thing. Things are changing.
Yeah. And so then, now that we're going into kind of an election year here, do you think that's normally positive, negative?
I don't know.
This is going to be a weird one.
It'll be a fun one, John. It'll be fun. There's a lot to talk about. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
There's a lot to talk about. How much of that gets, quote unquote censored, out there as we put it out, I'm not sure. And again, that applies to everyone because even just talking about certain issues that could be considered political are occasionally getting censored now. So it's, yeah.
That's a really good point, because that is a very, I mean, it feels like a very new phenomenon. The last, almost since COVID.
Yeah.
There was some of it in the sense of like the crypto stuff, but that was because the ICOs were,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, the scams were kind of out of control there.
Yeah.
But other than that, it seems like at COVID, it was like this like sea change that happened with the media companies, where now it is like you have to be careful about what ideas,
Yep.
or even how you enter the idea, because even if it's not something that they would be upset with if they actually paid attention to it, you can't enter it in an interesting or shocking
Yeah.
way, because
It can't be shocking. It can't be
Right.
shocking. So you can enter it into an idea. You can use a lot of the same language of that idea. You cannot shock people into reading it. But if you were to get somebody into an idea using an advertorial, get them to click off into something else where they're on your turf, that's a different story. But obviously we know that degrades the whole responsiveness of the entire experience.
Yeah.
But I'm interested to see how that's going to change or become even more aggressive as we move into this election cycle, because I think there will be another clampdown. Just see how extreme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's
Yeah.
probably a good prediction.
Now is the time to talk about social issues before media shuts you down.
Yeah. No, uh that's definitely coming.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
cool. Well, is there any other big things that you think we should hit before? Because this has been a great conversation, Brian. I really
Yeah, it's been a lot of
talking
fun.
about this.
I've got to get to FMS. I mean, I don't know how many years you've been doing that. Like I said, it was right on my son's birthday, and I've traveled so much over the years, and I haven't traveled much since pre-COVID, but
Yeah.
before COVID, I was on the road, 10 days out of the month, something like that. And I've got three
Yeah.
kids, and so I always make it a point to stay home for their birthdays.
Oh, you have to. No, I did the same
Yeah,
thing pre-COVID. I was kind of on the road similarly.
yeah.
And COVID was such a nice reset. And then I was like, wait, I got to be very conscientious about my travel. So I brought my kids down.
Yeah, I read
helping,
about that.
helping in the event, and it's great.
Yeah. Well,
But
next
yeah.
time you're in Baltimore or wherever, I'll make it a point to see you for sure.
Yeah, no, I'll let you know. That'd
Yeah.
be great. So
No, but I think, parting thoughts, I think it's all about creating that customer experience. I think the next 10 years are really going to be middle of funnel things. It's maximizing lifetime value, and we can only do that through creating strong relationships that stand the test of time.
yeah, no, and that's a fantastic way to leave it, because that is the kind of the essence of the business.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, thanks again.
All right. Thank you, John.
This is fantastic. So
All right.
have to have you on again as more things develop.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks, John.